Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. Now, today is the first Friday of May, so that means it is officially Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. This month, as far as thematics and recommendations go, is my favorite month of the year. I have always been a fan of Asian cinema, regardless of whether we're talking about Hong Kong martial arts movies, Bollywood, Japanimation, anything. I've just always been really fascinated by pictures that have origins in the East, and I hope that some of the recommendations that we make over the course of the next couple of weeks will appeal to you as well. So today's list of recommendations is one that I have wanted to do for quite a while, but I kept putting it off. But I think this is the day. All of today's recommendations are featuring films with animation either from Japan or from Korea. And let me tell you, all of these stories are absolutely fantastic. These films feature tales that are just as complex and grown up as, say, any live action movie you'd find in Western cinema. These stories cover relationships, they cover situations that are incredibly complicated, and they also come from genres that are all over the place. I've got horror stories in here, I have romances, I have absurdist comedy, fantasy, science fiction. I mean, these stories are amazing, and there's one for everybody out there. Even if you do not consider yourself an animation fan, please check these out. These are not your standard Disney or Pixar tales. They are incredible. I'm also a Pixar and Disney fan, don't get me wrong, but these definitely work on a different level. So, again, even if you don't consider yourself an anime fan, I think that you should watch these and see if one of them will speak to you. As always, all of these recommendations are available entirely for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card, and they will come from one of our 3 video services. Those are CleveNet's Overdrive, Hoopla Digital, and Canopy. Without any further ado, I want to go ahead and jump right into the recs. Okay, kicking things off with a selection available on Hoopla. It's 2018's The Night is Short, Walk On Girl. Now, the tagline for this anime feature is a comedy about one epic night in Kyoto, and that is absolutely accurate. This one is absurd, it is ridiculous, it is funny, it is romantic in places. It's just all over the place in the absolute best of ways. Now, if you are familiar with the anime series, The Tatami Galaxy, this actually takes place in that same universe, but it's 100% standalone, so you don't need to know anything about that anime, but you'd be able to tell that they take place in the same world because the animation, which is incredibly different from what I think a lot of us view as anime style art, is definitely in keeping with that same realm. And when I talk about the art in this one, there is a simplicity to it that actually adds to the style and tone of the storyline. I mean, it's like this perfect melding of art where you have something outrageous, the story in this case, and you have this sort of quirky style of design to the characters that just really lends itself to that particular note that the story creators are working with. So again, you have like definitely absurdist tendencies within the storyline itself. You have almost a slightly surreal feeling to the art as well, and even the animation style. It's not that typical giant eyes, like really smooth lines. It's absolutely not that, and in the best of ways. So in The Night is Short, Walk On Girl, as I mentioned, tagline, comedy about one epic night in Kyoto. But the story actually focuses in on 2 characters. One is a young college woman who's only referred to as kohai, which kind of roughly translated means junior, whether or not you're talking about junior in school or junior in work or whatever, you are junior to someone. So you have kohai and you also have senpai, which, if you couldn't guess, kind of means senior. Again, could mean school, could mean work, whatever. So you have kohai and senpai, junior and senior, and they are out for a night in the town. It's very clear that senior, the young man, is interested in his junior, but due to a series of increasingly odd events, is always impeded from, officially asking her to be his girlfriend. And it feels very much like one of those indie comedies, the live action indie comedies, like it could be something Kevin Smith would put together. That kind of absurd. Actually, that's a really good comparison that I honestly had only thought of just now. But yeah, there's a sort of charming absurdity to the whole situation. Every time something happens, it seems a little bit odder than the next and the next. And these two, keep getting separated, and different circumstances happen where she's trying to get back to him, and it's just, it's great. It's really, really not realistic in, a sort of naturalistic film way, but it's definitely fun and out there and just a real journey. And I really enjoyed that. It's all taking place over the course of just a couple of hours. And, I love stories that really keep you in the moment. And this one absolutely does that. One of the great things about this, in addition to it just being odd and unusual and different from what I think, again, most people think of as anime, you also have two different language tracks. You have the original Japanese language with English subtitles. That's my preferred way to watch. But on this, you actually also have an English language dub available. Again, entirely for free, as always. So this one, there's no excuse. Whether or not you like subtitles, this one will give you an option to view. So if you are interested in a really quirky, odd, romantic comedy with fascinating situations and really, really interesting art and art style, check out The Night is Short, Walk On Girl. It's really great, and it's a lot of fun. Again, available on Hoopla in both English and in Japanese. You won't regret it. Okay, so the rest of today's recommendations are actually available on both Hoopla and Canopy, so regardless of which platform you prefer, you'll be able to watch these, so no problems on that front. And this next one is from 2018 as well. It is Maquia, When the Promised Flower Blooms. This is an absolutely gorgeous anime film, like absolutely beautiful. So in this story, we have the titular character, Maquia. She is a young woman who happens to be a member of a special race called the Iorfs. And Iorfs are this group of people who age until they look essentially teen-ish, and then they can continue on looking that age for centuries. So you have this practically immortal race of people. They have managed to become totally peaceful. Their land is never ever at conflict with anyone. It's idyllic, it's perfect, it's wonderful until an outside race decides to invade. This other race decides that they want a piece of immortality as well, and they are going to somehow figure out a way to use Iorf's blood system, incorporated into their own, in order to gain that essential immortality. Maquia is unique to her people in that while everyone else is already like very satisfied with their happy idyllic lives, she's always wanted something a little bit more. And so when this war comes, it sets off, it's like the catalyst for her to get out. She ends up on this journey, and along the way she finds this tiny human baby, and he's all on his own. His mother has passed, and she takes him in and raises him as her child. She's this runaway person who's, part of a race that's essentially been overthrown and overcome by a dominating force. And she's so lonely except for this other one person. And her entire life for a while becomes taking care of herself and this child and surviving. And it's a really interesting dynamic that the two have, because of course, as I mentioned, Iorfs look the same no matter how many years pass. And she's got this human child who continues to grow into a toddler, an actual, young boy, into a teenager, into a man, and the relationship shifts that they go through. It's really fascinating. Also incredibly appropriate for Mother's Day, which comes on this Sunday. Um, you've got phenomenal animation. This one is definitely much more in the vein of typical anime styled art. Very smooth lines, beautiful exaggerated features like large eyes, things like that. But the animation itself is very fluid. Some of the battle sequences are crazy and very much harrowing. Like you definitely feel the action sequences, the times of war. It's pretty intense. Uh, but at the heart of it, it really is this story about this relationship between this young woman and this ever changing boy. Uh, any story that focuses on a relationship between a mother and child will be rife with challenges. I mean, that's just motherhood. But add on to that layer of complexity where her child grows and changes physically and visually, and she stays the same. And it causes, all of the regular frustrations, but then amplifies it, having that element on top of it, because, there are definitely moments where he rebels simply because why should I listen and take advice from this person who looks younger than I do? Um, it gets pretty intense relationship wise too. So I really, really loved those aspects of it, and the different layers of, you know, standard sort of mother son storytelling with that extra level and layer of fantasy on top of it. Um, you also have a couple of side stories that are really quite compelling as well. There's an old friend of Maquia's that has essentially been held captive for all of the intervening years by that invading horde. You've got um, other individuals who help her along the way, and you get to know and see and hear about some of their backstory. But that central relationship between Maquia and her young son, it really, really is the heart of the story. And you get to see a phenomenal amount of chronology of the sons. I mean, like, you see his birth, you see his aging process, and it really does, I think, get to you. You feel this, you feel very connected to Maquia because of these changes that she sees and you're seeing at the same time. So if you're looking for something that really explores complex relationships, if you want a mother-son story, if you also want something that moves along, because again, like I said, there are some pretty intense action sequences too due to the war. If you're interested in that kind of layered dramatic storytelling with that fantasy on top of it, check out Maquia When the Promised Flower Blooms. Again, it's available on Hoopla and Canopy, and this one as well is available with both a Japanese language track and an English language track. So no subtitles necessary if you're not into them. All right, next recommendation, also available on Hoopla and Canopy, is 2018's Liz and the Bluebird. This is my pick of the week. I love this film so much. Liz and the Bluebird actually takes place in the same universe as the anime Sound Euphonium. Very niche anime, but absolutely perfect if you were in college band and you played a rather odd or unusual instrument, like the euphonium. This one in general, though, is a total standalone story. Again, yes, it takes place in that Sound Euphonium universe, but you don't need to have any familiarity with it in order to get the entire story. The only reason I even know that is because I watched Sound Euphonium and can definitely place how the characters fit into that world. So anyway, Liz and the Bluebird. This is the absolute perfect story for music lovers, people who are involved heavily in arts who were involved in the more serious element of professional music and training for that level, uh, because man, does this have the feels. Um, in Liz and the Bluebird, we focus primarily on the relationship between Mizore and Nozomi. These are two young women who are in school. One is an oboist, that's Mizore, and one is a flautist, that's Nozomi. And they are working on a piece together that is supposedly based on a German fairy tale called Liz and the Bluebird. Now, in this made up fairy tale, a young woman ends up taking care of a bluebird that transforms into a person. And it's all about the relationship between those two and about the idea of letting that bluebird go free when it's time for her to go. And that little fairy tale story parallels the relationship between Misore and Nozomi, though in unexpected ways. You initially will watch the film and feel one character relates to another in more ways than it actually does. And you get these flip flops back and forth, and it's just very smartly done. Um, you get the persona types that you would expect to find in conservatories. You get the loner who's really pretty focused on, her own thing. You've got another girl who's definitely like, the belle of the ball. Those are definitely archetypes that exist for a reason, especially again in the music world. And the way that the two interact is so believable. And, while I was watching, I really thought about, how the situations I was seeing on screen definitely were situations that I was either part of or like had witnessed, as part of that particular music scene. Um, you get very real moments of jealousy, and you find that 100% within actual circles of music students. One of somebody is going to be better than somebody else. There's always going to be somebody better. And that sort of rivalry, no matter how close the two people might be, is always underlying. And that sense you get throughout, it really, really rang true. You've also got phenomenal artwork. I love this particular team's way that they deal with color and movement. I mean, everything is so saturated with these greens and these blues and these grays. Everything feels very alive. And that's something that you feel definitely within Sound Euphonium as well. You know, the music within this particular film, absolutely gorgeous. I love orchestral stuff, so this is definitely right up my alley and would be for anybody who likes that kind of music. I you also have elements of, you know, complex layered relationships between other characters in here, not just those two. You see a evolving relationship between Mizore and her teacher, how, you know, she has to learn to start to really rely on other people if she's going to become, more with her music. And when we meet the two characters at the beginning, she's really just sort of satellite revolving around Nozomi. Nozomi has tons of friends. She's outgoing. She is always the life of the party. And Misore, like I mentioned, is pretty isolated, and she just has Nozomi. And it's really seeing her grow and shift as the film progresses that, gives you as an audience member that sense of forward motion. Anyway, if you are a fan of music, if you like, stories about complex relationships, if you like parallel tales, which again, that is so brilliantly done in this. It's not obvious at all. Like I said, character parallels and shifts happen throughout. Please check out Liz and the Bluebird. It is absolutely fantastic, and again, my pick of the week. So, my last pick for this week, again, also available on Hoopla and Canopy, is for my one Korean animated feature, and that's 2014's Seoul Station. If you have ever seen Train to Busan, you 100% need to watch Seoul Station. It is essentially the prequel origin story to the zombies in Train to Busan, and it is a ride, man. It is very fast and there's action and horror from the very, very first few frames. And, if you like stories that keep moving, that are fast paced, this is definitely the one for you. Um, so in Train to Busan, we are dealing with a movie, live action wise, where a father has to get his daughter from Seoul to Busan on this unending train of horror and misery and zombies. Seoul Station essentially takes all of that into consideration and gets you to the train. Like, where did the zombies come from? Like, who else was involved in getting this mass of zombies to exist? And it's just frame after frame of action, horror, adventure, nonstop. You have three primary characters that you're following: a young woman who is involved with a young man who has money troubles. Due to his money troubles, he is considering asking his girlfriend to do some pretty questionable things. And so at the very beginning of the film, we have the two of them separating. That's when the zombie plague hits. And the rest of the film is the two of them trying to find their way back to each other. The young man ends up meeting up with her father, and the two of them have to face authorities, they have to face actual zombies, they have to face panicked human beings, all in order to get to her. And she is also having her own series of unfortunate events going on with, again, authorities, panicked humans, zombie hordes. So these two factions are trying so desperately to meet. And again, nobody at this point knows what's going on because the zombie thing hasn't really, it's just evolving. It's evolving as we watch. And you're definitely on the edge of your seat from the very, very first few scenes. Again, with this being like a prequel to Train to Busan, you know where the story's going to end up. The story will definitely end with a lot of zombies converging on this train. But how does everything evolve? How, what confusion occurs that these zombies are able to get to the point that they do? And you see that, and it's absolutely believable, because who is ever expecting zombies to be the answer to the what's wrong with this guy question? Not too many people. Though I would strongly recommend, if someone seems dead and they come back to life, that's probably a pretty good clue. The three voice actors that they get for these characters are all actually quite established within Korean cinema. So you get really reliable performers. But even more than the voice acting, it really is all of the animation. Like, the style is fraught, and I can't think of a better word than that. You feel tense when you're watching the animation occur, how these creatures are moving, like the ridiculously fast-paced speed of these creatures is insane in the live action version, and that intensity definitely carries over into this. So, if you are a horror fan, if you were a fan of Train to Busan, whether or not you've watched Train to Busan, and you happen to like horror, if you're just looking for a good story that's going to have lots of action, that's going to keep you glued to your screen, check out Seoul Station. You won't regret it. It's available again on both Hoopla and Canopy, and it is a fantastic fast watch. Okay, so those were my recommendations for Asian Animation Week. All of these stories came from the 2000 teens. If you have recommendations that are also from that particular time period, it doesn't matter what Asian nation they originated in, please, please, please comment with those below. I am a massive, massive fan of Asian animation and I'm always looking for recommendations. So again, please comment with those below. If you have a recommendation for a theme you'd like to see us cover in the next few weeks, please comment with that too. Definitely always looking for help in that regard. So as always, thank you so much for joining me today. I adore putting these lists together this week especially. And it's always so much fun to be able to just sort of dive really deep into our catalog and see what I can find. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out this week's episode. Thanks again, and I will see you next week. Bye bye.